Hi, everyone. Today we have Britt Sevitt. She had a journey similar to a near-death experience, which changed her life. And it's all in her book, More to Life, A Skeptic's Journey from Depression to Spiritual Awakening. Thanks for being here today, Britt. Could you tell us your journey?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to talk about my experience. I know you usually interview people about near-death experiences. Mine wasn't actually related to near-death, but I did have a spiritual awakening, which was very similar to a near-death experience. My background is that I suffered with depression and anxiety for almost 2 decades, and I tried 30 different psychiatric medications, 15 different psychologists and psychiatrists, and nothing really helped, lots of conventional therapy. And eventually, my psychiatrist encouraged me to try meditation, and I ignored his advice for many years. And eventually I succumbed, and I meditated regularly for a long period of time and didn't have much benefit, didn't experience the benefits that everyone talks about. And eventually I did have a major breakthrough, which basically happened overnight with a spiritual awakening. I immediately realized it was similar to an NDE. I must have seen something on television or read something about a near-death experience, and I realized it was very similar. And I'd also seen Eckhart Tolle on Oprah, I think, and I realized that what I'd experienced was similar to what he had gone through. It's very difficult to describe in words, but I'm going to try. I have tried to describe it in my book as well, but it's one of these things that is very subjective. What I felt was my depression and anxiety lifted immediately. It was like a huge weight, huge black cloud had been lifted off me. I'd suffered with depression and anxiety for so long, and suddenly I felt alive. I felt totally calm and in bliss. It was like there was a huge light source above my head. I sort of felt it like a huge light source above my head. And I realized that that was God or source or the creator. And shining down from that light source was just unconditional love and bliss. And this huge sense of awe, not awe as in fear, there was no fear whatsoever. It was just wonder and amazement. And I felt deeply present. Everything seemed much more beautiful. Colors were popping out. My breathing was deep and hoarse. And I just felt this deep sense of oneness and connectedness with everything around me. I realized that I had activated some sixth sense. The only way I can explain it is that we have our senses which give us knowledge and information. Like I can see now this computer, so I know it's a computer, or I can hear a bird, so I know it's a bird. And suddenly I seemed to have this extra sense that was giving me knowledge, and I didn't know how it was giving knowledge, but it was like I was being given knowledge in uncertain terms. And one of those things was that this knowledge that we are souls. And I'd never been spiritual before. I had been religious, but not spiritual. And I'd never really thought about the concept of souls or thought about before life, afterlife, anything like that. And suddenly I had this deep knowledge that we are all souls, and we are infinite souls that live before this lifetime and after this lifetime. And that this personality, Britt, this body and personality is just an ego personality and a character that we're playing for this lifetime. And that led me to just see everybody and everything in a different way. I suddenly felt love for other people because I realized they were just playing this character, and each of our characters has come here in order to learn lessons and to grow and to overcome certain things. So I would sort of be able to, like, people wouldn't ruffle me as much anymore. This experience I'm talking about was sort of over a period of a couple of days. Afterwards, it waned and faded. But during that time, like, you know, nothing ruffled me. It was like I could see through to people's souls and just understand that they were a pure good soul and they were just playing this role. So I didn't judge people as much. I still don't judge people as much. And it's sort of like we're a computer game, and it's our soul that's controlling the character. The character is me, Britt, but actually it's my soul that's controlling the character. It's quite difficult to explain. I realized that my consciousness had expanded. And beforehand, I would never have been able to explain to you what that meant. But suddenly I realized I had a different awareness of this world, and I could suddenly see the bigger picture. And in the same way you sort of go onto a map on the computer and you can zoom out, suddenly everything, I sort of, in the scheme of things, everything, it was like there was a bigger plan going on. And this lifetime, this character that I'm playing is a tiny, tiny dot in the scheme of me, in the scheme of my life, and that I'm a soul that lives many lives before and lives on afterwards. And it was just like this expanded consciousness and really seeing just that there's so much more to us. And it really gave me a deep sense of calmness, knowing that nothing is worth stressing about, because this is all just tiny in the scheme of us. Whatever's going on now is really tiny. I felt a deep sense of calm, no anxiety whatsoever. And it just felt like everything happens for a reason, that there's no such thing as tragedy. And that even, I remember walking along the street, like the day it happened or the day after it happened, and I wrote down in my phone, like, even if I or somebody close to me dies, like, it's all fine. It's all absolutely fine. And everything is for a reason. I mean, I know people say that everything's for a reason and it's meant to be, but it was like such a deep knowing that it really is, and everything is part of a big plan. I realized that what I'd experienced was actually a glimpse of enlightenment, what different religions call different things, call redemption or salvation or enlightenment, and that I had had a brief glimpse of it, and that is where we are meant to be headed. My depression never came back. And although I didn't stay in that state of expanded consciousness, so much in my life changed. And I still had a lot of the residual feelings and knowledge that came with that spiritual awakening. And many other changes continue to happen in the weeks and months that followed.
Thank you, Britt. So sorry for that pause. I like to have just you on the screen, so it takes me a few seconds. So the question that I have, first of all, I know there are going to be people, there's so many people out there, especially today in 2021, that have anxiety, depression, doom, gloom, you know, maybe don't even want to get out of bed in the morning, and it's hard to move on. So some people might want to reach out to you for help. So what are the different ways that you help? And could you tell us about the book you've written?
Well, I now help working with people one-on-one, online, in person, and with groups, really helping people unravel their emotional blockages and align with their soul. One of the things that happened to me was that after this awakening, I really had to be very, very true to myself. It was time for me to align with my soul. And I didn't know what that meant beforehand. I didn't know that we are here to align with who we are truly meant to be, with our authentic self. And that was something that I was like forced into, like radical truth telling, with whether things are right for me, whether things are wrong for me, what I'm supposed to be doing, not what other people expect from me. And that's something that I help people with now. At the end, I will tell you the name of where you can find my book and my website. Yeah, I work with people now in that field.
That's so good to hear. I I do something similar. So I became a hypnotherapist to help people because I was struggling with anxiety, and a hypnotherapist helped me. So I use nutrition, I use foods because that's what helped me. And I use different relaxation techniques. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, it's growthfactor.org@gmail.com. You can email me. But any chance we can also see your book, I'd love to see it because I love the title. And I know there are people. Yeah.
More to Life, The Skeptic's Journey from Depression to Spiritual Awakening. I mean, my main advice to people who come to me, because I did suffer with depression for almost 2 decades, my main advice to people that come to me is really a sort of combination of 3 things. I believe a consistent daily practice of meditation is really important. Second thing is to really, as I said, to align with your true self, to discover who you really are. Where in your life are you not being true to who you're meant to be? Because that really can make us depressed. When we're not being who we're supposed to be, who we've come here to be, that can really affect us. And the third thing is also some sort of trauma release. A lot of us, there is major trauma and there's minor trauma. I believe that we have all suffered with different traumas from our childhood, and we take them through. And some sort of trauma release work, I think, is also hugely beneficial.
Those are good tips. Thank you. So there are people, there are always skeptics that will listen to stories similar to yours and they'll say, probably didn't happen. It's just a basic meditation. Is there more you could share, or is there something that proves it to you and a lot of us that what happened was real?
Well, I was the biggest skeptic. I was not into anything spiritual, anything woo, anything alternative. I didn't even, I suffered for so long and I didn't try anything alternative. As far as I was concerned, if hardcore psychiatric drugs couldn't fix me, then there was no way any of this other airy fairy stuff was going to help. So I was really the biggest skeptic. I only wanted science and nothing else was of interest. Hence the subtitle is A Skeptic's Journey. And a lot of what happened afterwards was I really needed to start stripping away all that skepticism about these things that go on, and the sort of the veil between this world and beyond had opened up for me and continued to open up for me in different ways. And I had no choice but to believe it. When you have something that's experiential, I realized that when you hear somebody else telling their story, it's different. But when you experience something that you can't deny, it's just, you have no choice but to start believing in something different. And yeah, I realized at the time when it was happening that I thought, wow, if I hadn't known that that was a spiritual experience, I might have thought I was going crazy. I imagine some people go through a spiritual awakening and end up in a mental hospital. But yeah, that's the reason why I called my book More to Life, is I discovered that there is so much more to life and to this world than we can possibly imagine. And yeah, my blinkers were taken off.
For those of you who like stories like Britt, if you just click down below, Growth Factor, that's the name of my channel because it's about growth. That's why I named it how I did. And you'll see Paul Palnick, he actually went back to the other realm. I believe the date was August 13th of this year. So I feel so blessed that I was able to interview him and share that with his family. And I was able to put it on social media for them. And the brother reached out to me. So it was really beautiful. So Paul Palnick had a similar story like you, Britt. And I love how he explained he felt very humbled. He almost felt guilty. Why did it happen to me? Because he was meditating also, and he saw the light and he saw a lot of what you saw. And because it's very real to the person that it happens to. And I would love to hear more about your journey. Or is there more that you can share with us, more insights or anything that happened to you since then?
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about feeling guilty, because a lot of me did start thinking, why has this happened to me? Why? And I realized that it isn't just happening to me. I started reading up, and I realized that it wasn't just me that has experienced a shift in consciousness. I believe we're at a critical time in humanity, and that many people are waking up and having spiritual awakenings, and that actually the consciousness of the planet is changing and shifting. And I think it happened to me in order for me to be able to help other people go through the changes that the world is now experiencing. Yeah.
Wonderful. I just looked it up. I was wondering the different places to buy your book. I see it's on Amazon. Are there other places to buy your books? I'm definitely going to buy two, one for me, and I always like to gift a book to a friend and then pass it around. So
I don't know where I think it's on in all. I don't live in America, so I think it's on all the major online bookstores. I know I live in Israel, and so I tend to encourage people to order from here, from Book Depository. But I know it's on Amazon in UK and America, and I think it's pretty much on other online bookstores. Britt Sevitt. Yeah.
how do you spell Britt and Sevitt? So
BRITT SEVITT. And that's also my website, brittsevitt.com.
Okay. Is there an email you want to share also? I wasn't sure if you shared it before.
Sure. brittsevitt@gmail.com.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Are there other tips you have for people who, maybe some people are already meditating or they don't want to meditate yet, people who are struggling with depression, anxiety, doom, gloom, things like that? Are there more tips you can give to us?
Yeah, well, I mean, I meditated for a long time before I had a shift. Most people, once you start meditating consistently, daily, most people begin to reap the benefits within a few weeks or months. For me, it took longer, hence I had sort of a more impactful experience. But it's really a matter of finding what works for you. I was a terrible meditator to begin with. I used to beat myself up, judge myself, tell myself I wasn't doing it well. And that's really the sort of opposite to the way meditation should be. Because really the idea is there's no wrong way to meditate. You know, as soon as you find yourself getting caught up in your thoughts, you bring your attention back to the guided meditation you're listening to, or to your breath, or to, you know, to something that you're placing your focus on. And it's really just a practice, building a muscle. And I always recommend people to start small. If people who haven't meditated before, start small, but commit daily. It's much better to do a daily, consistent, short practice than once a week for a much longer period of time. And yeah, it changes your life, changes the way you are able to step back from situations, the way you are able to look at your own thoughts, to look at your own emotions, to see what's going on with you, to stop reacting to things instead of responding to things. It really, it's life-changing. I think most people who meditate realize that it's so hugely beneficial, but it's so hard in this day and age to sit yourself down. None of us really want to just sit down and, you know, with such busy lives, no one wants to make the time to sit down. And it's also very difficult and painful to sit down with your own thoughts and to sit down with your own emotions and to be willing to witness them and observe them. But that really is the key to healing.
I was wondering, for those who might feel a little bit impatient, does it take a short amount of time? I mean, everyone's different, I'm sure, but how long did it take you to start practicing until you had this awakening that helped get rid of your anxiety and depression and your dark feelings?
For me, it was a long period of time, but that was because I actually had a blockage. Normally, when you meditate, your consciousness expands slowly and gradually, and you start to reap the benefits gradually. With me, I actually had a blockage that wouldn't allow, I had a trauma that wouldn't allow my consciousness to expand. So for me, I think it was like a year or so before I actually, and then I had this major expansion of my consciousness. But generally, most people will feel the benefits, not as, you know, in such a huge way, but they will feel the benefits much sooner.
Do you have tips in general of how, let's say we want a little bit quicker than taking months and months or a year. We probably, most of us have people in our life. It could be family, friends, neighbors. Especially today, people feel one way or the other about certain topics, just so opposite. And it could really create a lot of bad and dark feelings. And a lot of people today feel financial pressure more than before because of a lot of changes in the world. Are there explanations that you have? Why do you think the world has come to this in the last 1 or 2 years, and some tips about that? For example, we're struggling with family, relatives. Why is it like this, and what can we do about it, and change our attitude about it?
Well, after I had my awakening, I needed explanations, and I discovered that this enlightenment that I'd experienced, this state of consciousness that you might call redemption or salvation or enlightenment, or even in Judaism, you refer to it as like the Moshiach or Messiah, messianic consciousness, is something that was going to happen, has been predicted in virtually every religion to happen in these coming years. And I realized that actually what's happening is that the world is going through a massive shift in consciousness now. And in order for the world to move into this new era, into this messianic era, into whether you call it the golden age, the age of enlightenment, Aquarian age, messianic era, whatever one calls it, it's called something different in every religion. In order to move into it, we need to do a lot of healing work. And after my awakening, I had to do a lot of emotional healing work to clear out all of my emotional blockages and trauma and baggage and shadows. And I realized that now what's happening with the world is that as the world shifts into a new state of consciousness, we are needing to heal all the collective shadows that's going on. And so it's chaotic. It's chaotic. But in order to get to that place of bliss and love and this state of enlightenment, it's not just an individual work. It is individual work, and individual work is what will make it change. The more people that are doing it, the more it will change on the planet. But also there needs to be a lot happening within the collective.
I imagine because you changed so much, you went from clearing out trauma and getting rid of a lot of the dark feelings and wiping away your anxiety and depression. It might have changed relationships, close people in your inner circle, people a little more on the periphery. How did you handle being able to speak more openly with some people, not at all about it? People might have shut you down. How did you deal with relationships? How did you change, and how did you handle with the changes in relationships?
I think I went through a period where I really needed to sort of be alone a lot of the time, and to do a lot of healing work and to really tune in with myself. I had been so out of alignment with my true self, that I really needed to work out who I was, what I was here for, what was true to me. And yes, that did mean some relationships changed, and people, I think, have had to get used to a new me that has to do more what is right for me in order for me to come into who I'm meant to be and to align with my soul.
You mentioned you're a skeptic, and I was just browsing at your book that you used to be more about science and hard data. How have you changed, and why do you think you changed? Because most people, that is what they want. Of course, you believe in science, you believe in facts and figures. It's hard to step into that spiritual realm. And how did you make that change, and what's different now?
So everything that sort of continued to unravel and to happen to me after the awakening, I had such an analytical mind that I needed to analyze it and understand it, and to really understand what was going on with me. I didn't just take anything lightly, but I had to move into this new zone. I'd grown up religious, but not spiritual at all. And suddenly I had to move into this new zone, and I was only into science and conventional things, medicine, etc. And I started my eyes were just open to something new. And I had to look at everything I'd believed in up to then and to see it in a different light.
Thank you, Britt. Is there more that you can share? Is there more that insights you can give to people, things that you notice that are different, who you were before and who you are now, or any stories, synchronicities, anything more about your journey that you could share?
Yeah, so a lot of things happened to me following the awakening in the weeks and months that followed. Lots of crazy things. I mean, I went virtually vegan overnight. I went vegetarian, almost vegan overnight. I suddenly couldn't bear the thought of eating animals. I also changed with regards to caring about the environment. You know, this expansion of consciousness means that you just feel this sense of oneness with everything. So with animals and with the environment. And before I didn't really care about or look after the environment, I'm a bit embarrassed to say, but suddenly I felt this connection with everything. My body did a huge detox. I had one weekend where I just was purging, and then afterwards I couldn't go back to eating and drinking the things I had before. I detoxed from coffee and alcohol and things like that, and I realized we weren't really living the way we're meant to be living, or the way our bodies want us to be living. I also changed politically overnight, especially with regards to what's going on in the Middle East and Israel. I'd been extremely right-wing, living in a place of fear beforehand. And I suddenly moved over to just peace and love and just understanding, which was just a complete shock to me. All of it was like a shock to me, because it was sort of happening to me, but happening so suddenly, but it was all such a shock. I did have lots of crazy synchronicities and supernatural things happen that, you know, I think none of these things are coincidence, but they sort of hide behind nature. But if you explain to somebody some of the supernatural things that happen to you, they'll be like, yeah, okay, it's a coincidence. But when it happens to you, when you have one of these experiences, you can't deny it. You know that there's more going on. You know that there's more to life. And even things, you know, then really crazy stuff started happening. I started to be able to sense and feel people who'd passed away, channel messages from beyond the realm. And I was such a skeptic and a cynic that, first of all, I was like afraid of it and like, no way, this is not happening to me. So I really sort of discouraged it. I was like, this is not happening. And it continued to happen, and I had to embrace a lot of this weird woo stuff that I beforehand was like, this stuff does not exist, but it does. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you had a lot of therapists, a lot of medications, and I guess it was one therapist, it could have been more, that recommended meditation, but you didn't listen at first. What do you think made you finally listen? And what tips do you have, including people like me? I used to meditate. I haven't lately for a year or two. I just can't. I don't want to. And I think you mentioned some of the reasons why. What made you change, and what tips do you have for us to change and take more time and learn and grow like you did?
It was actually my psychiatrist. I'd been with the same psychiatrist for, I think it must have been about 8 years. And he also ran mindfulness courses, MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction courses, with his wife. And he'd encouraged me to go. And I was like, no, I can't meditate. I'm ADHD. I can't sit still. Not for me. I downloaded several meditation apps. They sat on my phone. I had an alarm every day for maybe 5 years, never did it. And I mean, I hit rock bottom. I'd had, you know, depression, low-grade depression for 17 years and quite a few bouts of major depression. And I really didn't want to live. And I really hit rock bottom. And I went along and I said, and medication, I know medication does help some people. For me, it never did. I would go on one medication, it wouldn't help. I would come off it, suffer the side effects of coming off it, crashing, you know, and just move from one medication to the other. And I just, you know, I every time if you just Google benefits of meditation, there's just so many. And I knew I had to give it a really good go. So I just said, was it my 40th birthday? I was lying in bed with depression. I think it was my 40th, or maybe it was a different birthday. And I was so hopeless that my husband bought me for my birthday a headband that measures meditation, but like to like you into it. I was like in bed. There was nothing else you could possibly have bought me that would have remotely been of any use. Yeah, so yeah, that's why I hit rock bottom. And often we need to hit rock bottom in order to really make a change in our life.
Ah, this has been so wonderful. I know you're going to help so many people, Britt, just even what you've shared already. Is there more that you'd like to say? Is there anything I forgot to ask or more tips you'd like to share?
I don't think so. Yeah, those three main tips were the things. I think there's a lot of things people can do by themselves. I think there are a lot of people that do amazing work, a lot of therapists, people you can go to. I now work doing energy healing and coaching and meditation with people, one-on-one and in groups. But there's also, I think it's really getting to the place where you decide, this is it, I need to change. And the hardest thing about depression is you don't feel like doing anything. And you definitely don't feel like doing anything for yourself. But that's where it needs to come from. It needs to come from you deciding, I'm going to change my life and I've got to do something about it because no one else can. So for me, that change was saying, okay, however bad this is, however much I hate myself and I hate my life and I wish I was dead, I am going to get up and show up and I'm going to meditate every day. Or whatever it is for you, whether it's exercise every day, whether it's journaling, you know, and it's cruel and it's harsh because when you're suffering with depression, it's the last thing you want to do. You know, I would more easily, and actually wrongly, everything I did to try and get better, I didn't do for myself. I did it for my husband and my kids. But really, you know, we need to be able to do it for ourselves and to say, I'm worth it. And I'm going to put in this effort. And it's not easy, but it's worth it. The healing journey, the diving deep into what's going on with you. And then your life can change. I never believed in a million years. You know, I sat there with depression, miserable, wanting to die. And I never believed in a million years that my life would turn around, that my depression would go away. I thought that was it, that I was stuck with it for the rest of my life. But there is hope.
That's so good to hear. There's so many people that need to hear that. Friends that I have, and now, of course, people around the world that you're going to reach out to. We really appreciate that you shared your story and you're so open, Britt. I really, really appreciate it. What I'll do is I'll put, if you just click the little arrow, there'll be a comment section where you can, I'll do chapters. So you can skip right to the part of Britt's story that you want. I'll put Britt's contact information, link to your book and all that so people can contact you really quickly. And of course, it helps if you use all those buttons, the like button, especially the subscribe button, because it keeps channels like this going and more interviews coming. Anything else you can think of, Britt, that you want to share with everyone?
No, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Come on,
Thank you for
share my story.
And thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to Britt. And I hope you enjoyed her story and you found it as helpful as I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Britt, and everyone.